Good morning, everyone. I appreciate you coming back for segment 2. I know last night's segment on the supply and specifically talking about the victims and the horrors they go through, I know that's a little hard. I noticed that some of you were rather emotional. I hope I did not ruin your dinner. I would not be surprised if I did. I would not be surprised if I ruined even your breakfast this morning. But for those of you ladies who were upset about what I said, and rightly so, last night, let me just kind of make myself the hero again. This morning, I'm going to pick on all the men. I'm gonna probably lose my man card for this. Some of the guys are already shaking their head yes. But I'm going to expose. I think yesterday what we were doing was educating. But really, when you're talking about the supply, and maybe I should pull out my magic coin again, put on the armor of God. That's my one commercial there. When we're talking about the supply, it is heartbreaking to understand. It is predominantly violence against women, and more than predominantly, that violence against women is actually being perpetrated by men. I touched just briefly on the fact that there were female traffickers, but the reality is it's the guy paying for the sex that is truly responsible for that violence. I talked about being a businessman. I talked about this coin, and I talked about it being a supply on one side and rescue on the other, and rescue on the edge and demand on the other. And that demand, as far as what we do at Vigilante Truth, that's where we focus. See, 99.9% of all the organizations in the country at this time are focused on housing and restoring the victim. And before I go any further, I want you all to know that my heart is with those 99.9% of the organizations. We need to effectively rescue, we need to effectively remove, we need to effectively restore these girls and these boys back to their rightful place in society. We need to. I'm willing to die for that. So I don't want to say anything that you might construe as that is not my first heart for fighting trafficking. For fighting trafficking. And this is where I'm going to change gears in this segment. At Vigilante Truth, we're now famous for saying we're here to end trafficking. We don't fight it. We're here to end it. I'm not here this morning to fight it. I'm here this morning to end it. My skill set is to end it. Well, what are you doing, Bo? You're going to get on this little thin edge here, and you and some of your Navy SEAL buddies, and I got some of those, and when they hear me talk about trafficking, all they want to do is go kick down a few doors, shoot a few traffickers, which I'm okay with, morally. And that's their focus, and they think that's what should be done, but the reality is that's not going to end trafficking. That's just going to get rid of one trafficker. You might or might not effectually rescue 1, 2, 3 victims. And I'm not discounting that. Remember what I just said. Know my heart. But I want to end trafficking. I want all of those 500,000 girls and boys returned. So when I think big. I used to be extremely successful. Multi-millions of dollars I made in my businesses. I don't think small. I don't think in 1, 2, 3. If you want to fight trafficking, If you want to go out and shoot some traffickers, I would consider that fighting trafficking. You're going to be on this little thin edge, and you're only going to get those few hundred that I was talking about last year. And while we need to be doing that, and that's all that we're doing, and at least we're doing that, what I would tell you is that will not end trafficking. And you know what? Focusing just on the supply, focusing on the horrors that I explained to you last night, focusing just on that with 99.9% of your efforts, that won't end trafficking either. I told you I'm in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. And in Charlotte, North Carolina, as of today, while I stand here, there are 22 beds available for trafficked females and 0 beds available for trafficked males. Let me say that again. In fact, let me remind you what I said last night. Remember, Charlotte has 10,000 runaways each year, and 33% of those end up being trafficked. That's 3,300 girls a year. And if me and my Navy SEAL buddies, and they probably know a couple of airborne guys and a couple of bad, Marine dudes, and we go and rescue all 3,300 of those girls just in Charlotte, we don't even have a place to put them. And guess what? Those 22 beds that Charlotte has were filled up last year. Because as I said, these girls aren't on a 6-week rehab program. They're on a year's program. So every year that goes by is just more females that even if they were rescued, we'd have nowhere to put them. Nowhere to put them. Yes, we need to focus on the girls that have been rescued, and we need to pour our lives into them and pour our resources into them. The community, the government, whoever, I always hold the community responsible. I think it's a community problem. It's not a law enforcement problem. They're paid to go out and help with it, but this is a community problem. We all need to get involved. And we all need to get involved in ending trafficking, ending slavery, not in fighting it. So if you just focus on the supply or you just focus on the rescue, you're actually doing harm. You're actually making the problem worse. Ooh, I can prove it to you. 7 years ago, I got into trafficking. Worldwide, there were 27 million victims. I don't remember the exact number. Well, give or take, at the time the U.S. Department of Justice was talking about the 100,000 number for victims here in our country, and that's just specific to sex trafficking. Now, last night I was talking about 500,000, right? So this number has exponentially grown. 27 million in the world is now, it was like 2 years ago I heard 32 million. Listen, I don't even quote the numbers. The first numbers were bad enough. But if everybody is focused on supply and everybody is becoming aware, 7 years ago I'd say, hey, who in the crowd has heard about trafficking? And if there was one hand that shot up, I was amazed. Now, almost every hand will go up. Somebody's heard something about trafficking. At least they know it exists. Some still might have their head in the sand and think it's in other countries or big cities and not in these small towns. But the reality is, most people have heard about it. So those of us who have been doing these awareness kind of talks and these educational kind of talks, we're doing our job and the word's getting out. Celebrities and athletes have come on board and we're doing all we can to let you know that it exists. And then we're dumping as much money as people's hearts will pour in into restoring these girls and restoring these young men. And remember, I talked I said 80% are girls and 20% are young men. Let me be real. The 20%, the boys, nobody's taking care of them. And I say nobody in generalization. There's one or two organizations in the entire country that care at all about the boys. But all these resources and all of our efforts and all of the good-natured people are dumping all of their efforts into the supply side. And law enforcement is focusing on the thin edge of the rescues. And best that I can tell, the number of sex-trafficked individuals in our country is up from 100,000 to 500,000. Well, there's just more of it happening. So because there's more of it happening, then the numbers have gone up, or the internet. Oh, goodness gracious, with porn what it is today, it must be driving this industry. Well, yeah, that's a part of it, no doubt. And now you can just order a girl off the internet. I am quick to tell people, you pick up your phone, I'm going to pick up my phone. We're going to do it at the same time. You're going to call Domino's, and you're going to decide whether you want a pepperoni pizza, a sausage pizza, or a cheese pizza. And then you're going to decide which crust you want. And at the same time, I'm going to decide what age I want her, what race I want her, and is she going to be a blonde, a brunette, or a redhead. We're both going to say, go. My girl will be at my motel room before your pizza. Yeah? Oh, yeah. It's that easy. Oh, well, Bo, that must be the reason then that it's growing so fast. It's just easier to get to. It's not it. That's not it. Let me give you the simplest example I possibly can. And I've been using this for 7 years straight. And because we live in America, and because we are a capitalist society, our economy runs on capitalism, this is how our country works. Follow me on this, because this is important. This is, how do we end it? This is it, right here. If you put 10 bottles of Tide on a shelf at Walmart, I'm not picking on Tide, and I'm not picking on Walmart. Actually, I love Tide. It smells good. Yes, there's the commercial for them. If you have 10 bottles of Tide on that shelf, and there are 10 men standing in the aisle, remember, I'm about to start picking on the men. 10 men standing on the aisle, and each one of them wants to casually pay for a bottle of Tide. Most likely, it's because his wife told him he needed to go by Walmart and buy some laundry detergent. 10 men casually standing in the aisle. Each is going to buy a bottle of Tide. And out of nowhere, a wonderful organization made of rescuers and supply side organizations that are standing by and ready to care for these bottles of Tide. That organization rushes in and saves 5 bottles of Tide off of those shelves. What happens in America when that happens? What happens? Almost everybody that's been to college, had some kind of education, had to take an Economy 101 class. The very first graph you ever saw was a supply and demand graph. And the perfect amount of product was where those two things meet. And here's the thing. If you drop the supply, what happens with those 10 men? Those 10 men go into a buying frenzy because they realize in their head there's only 5 bottles left, and if I don't bring home one of those 5, I'm in a whole lot of trouble. And it gets crazy in the aisle. They're elbowing each other, they're fighting to get to that bottle. And you know what happens? In this case, the trafficker steps out. Says, oh, easy you guys, easy, easy. By the way, we only have these 5 as you know. Quit crawling all over each other. Somebody's going home without tonight. But what I would need you guys to know before you make this purchase is that originally they were $10 a piece, but now they're $12 a piece. Well, you know what? 5 guys step up and pay the new $12 price without thinking at all. And because it's now $12, the suppliers, in this case the traffickers, which after all are simply businessmen, the most evil kind, but businessmen nonetheless, will come back to fill the shelves, not with 10 new bottles, but 12. Because there's a new price. And there's a pent-up demand. A pent-up demand. You got the next 10 guys and you got the 5 that were there. So you still have a buying frenzy. So we bring more product to market at a higher price, and that cycle just keeps going and going and going and going. As long as we continue to rescue 5 bottles each time they bring in now 12, now 15, now 20. See what's happening to supply? It's growing. Because all we did is focus as good-hearted people. All we did is focus as good-hearted people with the best of intentions. We just focused on supply, on rescue, on restoration. We need to focus there. But we have to, in order to end trafficking, we have to also focus on demand. If there's the same example of 10 bottles of Tide on the shelves, and there's only 5 guys there to buy them, price will actually drop. Yes, the 5 will get bought at the new price. They'll slide the other 5 down. They might only replace 2 more, so there's only 7 next time at the new lower price. And that cycle begins in an opposite fashion, so that the supply is actually decreasing. Now, at Vigilante Truth, we focus on demand. So I know if I get up every morning and I keep chopping at this and chopping at this and chopping at this, eventually I might be able to end trafficking in this country just by focusing on demand. But you know what the perfect solution is? Equal supply and demand. Because if both of them are dropping at the same rate, it ends even faster. The increased supply cycle does not continue. It stalls. And then the demand side begins its decrease pattern. Do you follow what I'm saying? If we, as an American culture, only focus on the supply side, if we only focus on the victims, we're actually doing more harm. If we will focus on the victims and focus on the consumer demand, the men who are paying to have sex with these girls, then we will end sex slavery in this country. I believe that. An economist would agree with me. Any business person would agree with me. And that can be so simple. And you know what else is more exciting about fighting demand? Put it like this. If you walk into my house tonight and you decide you would like to steal my TV that I got at Walmart on sale for $346, if you want that $346 TV and you begin to take it off my wall, I'm going to shoot you dead in my living room. It just goes against everything I believe in, that somebody would be able to walk in my house and steal my TV. And I probably, with a jury of my peers, would get off for that. Most people would agree that I had the right to do that in my own home. Now, if I decide I'm going to steal, rescue, a trafficker's property, the supply female that he's trafficking and making $1,000 a day, $360,000 a year, if I try to take that from him, what kind of gunfight do you think I'm in? That's dangerous business. That's dangerous business. But if I'm exposing, remember earlier, supply side, we were enlightening, we were making you aware. Now, in the demand side, we're going to expose the real truth, the real way to end trafficking. We're going to expose who's really the guilty party is. Not the traffickers aren't guilty. I'm not saying that. It's all right if they all go to hell. Actually, I'm not saying that. If we can get one trafficker to come to the heaven side, he would quit abusing those girls, and that'd be a win. But as we expose what's going on, what we will find is that we're ending trafficking, that we are able to make inroads into this issue, and we're not getting shot at. We're not having to do any violence. In fact, in a perfect world, and this would be in a perfect world by this example, we don't even have to go rescue anybody. You know, if there's 10 bottles on the shelves and 5 guys buy 5 bottles, and we didn't have to rescue those other 5. You know, what happens really is they just get dusty. And if Walmart can't make any money off of that tide, they just pull the tide off the shelves and they put it in a warehouse. And in this case, the trafficker, if he's not making any money because nobody's trying to buy his product, then he just puts the girls back out on the street, because it might not cost a lot, but it costs something to feed and keep that young lady a slave. So if he only has enough demand for 2 slaves, he lets the 3rd slave go. I didn't have to rescue her, and nobody got shot. Does that make sense? Because fear is a big thing. Everybody is scared in the trafficking arena of the blah, 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 blah. Well, you don't have to be scared if you're fighting demand. You don't have to be scared if you're fighting demand. Now, there's all kinds of ways to fight demand. All kinds of ways. When I started fighting trafficking, I was given a stat. Can't verify the stat. Makes sense to me now. But the stat was that 50% of the consumer demand for having sex with these girls, in other words, 50% of the guys who were actually paying money to have sex with a sex slave, were truck drivers. I was like, what's wrong with truck drivers? I mean, hey, truck drivers are great people. I have a trucking company now. Some of my drivers are great guys. So, and it's not 50% of my drivers aren't, bad guys. So the stat didn't make any sense to me until I understood how the industry itself worked. Truck drivers have to park for 10 hours a day. It's mandatory by law. They have to pull into a truck stop or a rest area or an exit ramp, on-ramp, but they have to stop, cannot move the truck not 2 feet for 10 hours straight. And so you get all these trucks congregating in one place. And for those of you who have never been in an over-the-road tractor trailer, it's literally 2 seats, and right behind the back of the seat is a twin mattress. It's the only office I know of in the country that comes with a bed. And so the traffickers know that they're going to have a huge amount of demand in one place that comes with everything they need to make money. So they will drive females to the truck stops, and these females will be made to go from truck to truck to truck to truck to truck to truck to truck. Trucks are only parked, I'm enough to open a door, no more than that, barely open the door. Side by side by side. And girls are made to knock on that driver's door, and if they are allowed in to have some kind of sexual activity, they'll do that, get paid, and go out the passenger door and go back up and knock on the next driver door. If they aren't allowed in the truck, they'll go around to the front of the truck and then knock on the door. And they'll move that way down truck to truck to truck. The average truck stop's going to have anywhere between 100 to 200 trucks at any given time during the day. I was speaking at a law class. Law student, bright young man, said, "Sir, what would be the second occupation with the greatest demand?" And I said, "Son, it would be bankers and lawyers if the cubicles came with twin mattresses and the girls knocked on every single man's cubicle." It doesn't matter. It's not the occupation. It's just, where are men conglomerating? Where can I introduce a female into that setting? And that female is going to be coerced, blackmailed, beaten, some of the most horrible things, but she'll be smiling. Oh, she will be smiling, as if her life depended on it. And guess what? Her life does depend on it. So she's going to knock on that door, and she's going to say, "Do you want some company?" Or she's going to make up a story of she's homeless, or she's a runaway and she just needs a little $20 for something to eat. Or she's got children at home and she's just trying to take care of her children. "Please, mister, please." Or she just likes to have sex with fat 50-year-olds that haven't showered in days. Come on. It's all going to be a lie because their life depends on it. But those men are going to allow it to happen. They're going to pay to have sex with her. Now, here's where I'm going to get into the word that we use at Vigilante Truth, and that word is rape. And I apologize now to all the ladies. I can be considered a walking trigger when I'm using this word. The way I use the word, again, let me go back to what I discussed earlier. My heart, I love you all. I am sorry for everything that has happened to you. So please don't take this as callous. But here's what I know about the term rape. It means non-consensual sex. Non-consensual sex. Non-consensual. 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 I can't tell you how many times somebody's come up to me and gone, "Why are you even doing this? Why do you even care? Prostitution has been around forever. It's the oldest business in the book. You'll never stop it." And I just look them right in the eye and I say, "You're right." But here's what I've learned in 7 years. Prostitution as we know it no longer exists. Prostitution, by definition, and by what used to happen as little as 10 years ago, was, "Let me give you money for sexual activity." And the person receiving the money, in this case the supply side chain, she took the money and she kept it. Maybe she gave half of it to her pimp. The pimp's original job was security, to make sure she didn't get raped or beaten up. And we can all talk about the psychiatry of it. We can talk about her past sexual abuse. We can talk about her poverty level. But the point is, on some level, she was consensual to the act. And at some point, community and culture at large decided that's okay. Some of my hardest hurdles to go over are with law enforcement, because law enforcement still sees what's going on that's trafficking. They still see it as prostitution. And maybe they are or are not okay with prostitution, and maybe they are or are not by their superiors told to go out and in prostitution, which, by the way, in America is still blatantly illegal. But you know what? They don't get any calls. The superiors, the mayors, your government elected higher senators and congressmen, they're not getting any phone calls to go out and arrest prostitutes, because culture at large doesn't think it's morally incorrect anymore. So, by that standard, if nobody's telling them to go out and do it, they don't do it, whether they believe in it or not. They got other things to deal with. Murder, theft, noise ordinance. So I don't tend anymore to get up on a soapbox and start preaching about prostitution. I agree with culture. There is no way to end prostitution. There's no way to end the consensual sex between two grown adults. But mention here, two grown adults. I told you that there were 500,000 minors being sex trafficked. Minors cannot be prostitutes. Under statutory rape, federal laws, any female 18 or under the age of 18, 17 and younger, cannot have consensual sex. Which therefore means if a man is having sex with a minor, it is non-consensual, even if she says she loves it. It's statutory rape. So, we're not talking about prostitution just because you didn't check her ID, or she had a fake one, or no ID at all, and lied to you and said, I'm whatever she said, and you have sex with her. Dude, you're raping her. Statutory rape. No matter what she says, no matter how big she smiles. Statutory rape. What about an 18-year-old? Well, I'm going to tell you there's really no difference between a girl that's 17 and 364 days and a girl who's 18 and no days. Last I checked, she woke up today and she's going to wake up tomorrow, and in my mind, that's the same individual I'm looking at. And the reality is, if she's been trafficked from 16, 17, now 18, now 19, where's her mind anyway? You think at 18 she just woke up and said, oh, well, now I can do this consensually because this is what I always wanted to do. And you think at 18 that her pimp, her handler, her trafficker said, oh, you turned 18? Have a great life. It's been a pleasure to know you. Thanks for working here. No. No. So just because you find yourself in a situation that appears to be prostitution, in a situation that appears to be consensual, I would tell you it's not. In the first 6 years of fighting trafficking, I met one consensual prostitute to the 1,000 victims. One. And now I've been in fighting trafficking for 7 years, and now I've met two. So what does that tell me? That all the ads on the internet, that all the ads in the papers, the periodicals, all the hey, I know somebody's from your buddies, it's not consensual anymore. The game has changed. What's happening now is men are paying the pimp to rape the girl. Wait a minute, no. I gave her the money. Well, she didn't keep any of it. None of it. Zero. She took the entire $100 bill, or she took the entire stack of 10 $100 bills. And she took it right back and gave all of it to her trafficker. Do you think she wanted to have sex with you then? For free? Because you're cute? You're charming? Seriously? Then can you ask yourself, men, why did she have sex with you? Fear of her life? She was being beaten. She was being blackmailed. She was being coerced. She'd been told fraudulent and deceptive lies. Try any of those 5 things with a complete stranger, whether she smiles when you get there or not, whether she's smiling when you leave or not, whether you left $100 on the nightstand or not. if you have sex with a stranger under those 5 things, you've raped that girl and you're going to jail. You're paying the pimp to do those 5 things to the girl so that she will have sex with you. Do you follow what I'm saying? This is important. You're paying the pimp to rape the girl. How do we fight demand at the truck stops? The trucks that run in my trucking company are huge billboards, all the way down the sleeper cab and halfway down the trailers. It has big balls and chains on it, big wings and swords, big vigilante truth, and then one really long sentence or phrase says, "Stop the selling of rape." We're bold about it. We're bold about telling the truth. See, this is what I found. I've been talking to guys now for 7 years. For 7 years. And during those 7 years, all the guys go, "What?" You know, I've been face to face with these guys in situations, caught them red-handed, telling them what they're doing, and they say, "No, no, no," because no man wants to be a rapist. They'll self-justify every which way they can to make it consensual. I am sure that date rape was never invented by a female. It was a man who invented date rape. And you know what he was doing? He was going, "She said no, but I could only hear yes." Because that man, that first guy, the first date rapist, did not want to be a rapist. You know, a prison riot breaks out. You know who the first person to get shivved, stabbed, killed? It's the rapist. We hire felons at my company. I talk to murderers actually on a regular basis. And they all tell me that it is the rapist, it's the sex offender, it's the child molester that gets it first. So even on the prison level, what we will determine to be the lowest common denominator of morality in our country, they know rape is wrong. And if they know it and they recognize it, I'm going to guess that most men in general outside of prison would realize that as well. So that's what we do at Vigilante Truth. We sit down and educate men, whether it's groups or one-on-one, that, hey, you're paying the pimp to rape the girl. Are you a rapist? No, I'm not. Well, that's great. Then I'm done with you, and I don't have to worry about you being one of the 5 that pays for commercial sex anymore, because what you thought was consensual is absolutely not consensual. And if you ever, ever, ever pay for sex again, you're a rapist. At a bare minimum, if there's a lawyer in the room, I know I'm pushing it just a little much. How about accomplice to rape, which is, right, just as bad? You know, when our trucks pull into a truck stop, big billboard, all I do is ask the drivers to park it where the billboard can be seen. There are drivers in the truck stop, and those drivers occasionally will come up and say, you know, what's that all about? And so they can go to the website, vigilantetruth.com, and get all educated up. But what really happens is the traffickers see the truck, and they will load the girls up, and they will drive away with them. Because no trafficker is going to let his $350,000 a year asset be at risk of being picked up. So by fighting the demand, we're putting our trucks where all the men are. See, we're making sure the men get the message that they'd be paying for rapes right on the side of the truck. And in the process of changing their minds and hopefully at one point changing their hearts, at that point, it's the synonymous or the fruit on the tree from this happening is the pimps look at the trucks and in fear that that driver might make a phone call to 911, loads the girls up and drives away. So by fighting the demand, We have created a sex trafficking free zone. We've totally separated supply and demand for that 10 hours that my one truck is there. What does that look like in the real world? Back to Charlotte, North Carolina. From Center City, Charlotte, North Carolina, 30-mile radius, which would encompass everything around Charlotte, all the truck stops around Charlotte, all the rest areas around Charlotte. There's 10 of those locations. And of those 10 locations, if I take 10 of my trucks and park them there 24/7, 365, I will have eliminated 50% of the trafficking in what is the 10th worst city for sex trafficking in our country. Now that's all stats, 10th worst city. Hopefully your city is 50th, 100th, 1,000th, whatever. 10th is not so good. 50% of the consumer demand are the truckers. It's a stat that can go up or down. But do you understand how fighting demand can make a very real difference in the game itself, in the battle itself, in the fight itself? That's demand. So that's the end of the supply-demand conversation. Go ahead, take a break. We're going to come right back, so don't make it long. We're going to come right back, and I'm going to talk about demand a little more in this third segment. It'll be a short one, then we'll cut to lunch. But in this segment, I want to describe the men that make up this demand. I think that'll be important for you to hear as well. Thank you.